Welcome to the Honest Dog Breeder Podcast with me, your host, Julie Swan, where each week we dive in to discuss all things dog breeding so you can build a breeding business you love, producing dogs that fulfill their owners' dreams. I believe you can have an honest dog breeding program that also pays the bills. So throw those pods in your ears while you're cleaning kennels. I'd love to join you. Today, guys, we have Matt Beisner, and he is going to introduce himself because there is just so much you have going on right now. So, Matt, tell us a little bit about you.
Thanks, Julie. First of all, I'm really glad to be here, and I'll get into it in depth as to how meaningful it is to be able to have a conversation with an honest breeder, somebody whose principles are towards ethics and the consideration of the dogs and the human in that entire experience. My name is Matt Beisner. I'm a certified professional dog trainer with knowledge assessment. I'm also certified as a family dog mediator through Kim Brophy's LEGS program, and I have been training, and I use that word in quotes for a number of reasons. I've been training for about 12 years, I guess, 12 or 13 years. And I have the opportunity to be on a show called Dog Impossible, which is currently on Disney Plus. Season 1 and season 2 are there, as well as, I believe, in over 100 countries around the world. My wife and I are the founder of the Zen Dog, which started in Los Angeles and led to the opening of a facility there, which lasted for about 6 years. And I specialize in aggression. And I grew up afraid of dogs. So here we are.
Isn't that the dichotomy? That's perfect. And you are no longer out there anymore, right? You've moved?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, we relocated to Austin, Texas, which was part of an amazing change in quality of life. I didn't see that coming, but I've learned to see things as opportunities, no matter how difficult that might be. And we ended up closing the facility. We're in the process of finalizing that legally. But yeah, we made a family move out here to Austin, and it's been a remarkable shift in our quality of life for the better.
Oh, yeah. Well, gotta love Texas, right?
Mm-hmm.
First off, I would like to say you do have probably one of the best logos I've seen. You've got so much going on in your
Mm-hmm.
logo. And I just love it. So can you tell us, you had explained one time the circle is not it's not fully closed on your logo. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the logo, so for people that haven't seen it yet, and you can just go to the Zen Dog and Google the Zen Dog or come to my Instagram page, which is Matt_Beisner. The logo is, I'm giving away the secret here. I used to use this to test staff members that had been with me. I'd wait for about 3 to 6 months and see if they could actually identify what was in the middle. The logo is of a dog that is a sitting Buddha. That's the middle of the logo. And that dog and our coloring or branding is such that that's a deeper red, because for me, that's really where the blood runs. And then outside of the logo is a circle, and that circle is rough in its edges and it's unfinished. And the reason why it's rough and unfinished is because that's how life is. And the unfinished aspect of it is a symbol and reminder to me that there is something more that I don't understand, that I haven't yet let into to this sitting Buddha of a dog. And to be clear, I'm not the Zen Dog. I try to be its curator and caretaker. It's much larger than me. The symbol specifically in that open circle is a reminder of consideration, or what I call the +1, that there's something here in our conversation, for example, that I don't know, see, or understand, the knowing, seeing, or understanding of which would change my behavior for the better. And that's what that's there to remind me. And then our motto is, there are no bad dogs. And I will stand on that hill.
And to clarify, you're not just saying that there are no bad dogs because it's usually the people, bad people.
Great question. No, I don't. I know that that's really popular in our industry. It's fun to diss people. I don't really find that useful, since the people are the ones that we're hoping are going to be responsible for the dogs. No, there are no bad dogs. Roughly 90% of aggression, as I currently understand it, is fear-based. So if we frame it that way, particularly in my field where I see degrees of aggression that are fatal sometimes, if I just paused and thought, 90% of what I see in this behavior that's being classified as aggressive is actually fear driven, then that immediately puts me in a different space to be sensitive to, if not actually relate to, what the dog's experience might be.
Yeah. And so to clarify on that, so when you're saying fear-based, you're saying that the dog's reaction is actually something that it's afraid of. And so it is being super reactive. And so therefore, if we can approach it with more of a compassionate, like a kid who's afraid, but this kid,
Mhm.
have really sharp teeth. And so now we're just trying to take care of the kid and address those
Yeah,
fears. And then once we can help that kid be, more stable, or this dog be more comfortable in that area, then it's
yeah,
better.
yeah. That's a great way to frame it. My son is 6 and a quarter. He'll tell you, and my daughter is 3, and both of them, well, my daughter will bite. So the teeth thing is real. Fear is a primary emotion, different than anxiety, and I can jump into that later on. And there is growing indication in our field, and my apologies to your listeners for things that I'm still learning and I'm not fully informed on, because I think some things that I'm hearing are really significant in terms of how we might go about changing our behavior and relationships with dogs. There is growing indication in our field that fear may be genetic.
I could see a total pairing of that. Yeah.
Okay,
And
say
just,
more.
well, go ahead.
No, you say more. I want to hear from you how you see that.
Well, from what I'm looking at, right? What I see in my dogs is I have German short hairs. They're not aggressive dogs. Like, you really gotta do them wrong to get any kind of aggression out of them. And I can count on that 110%. And I have no fear selling a dog to a family with young children, because I just know that when that dog's really upset, it's not going to bite the kid. I mean, its soul gets crushed before it bites the kid in that dynamic. And so that I don't, whether I've done every single possible wonderful thing I can do for this litter, or whether those times I've been super busy and I haven't been able to do everything I wanted to do for them, I can still rely on that. That has to be genetic, because it's certainly not nurture.
Mm, yeah, yeah, that's interesting for me to hear. I wonder. I know that you you are in the realm of breeding where like 10 years seems to be the benchmark for a breeder you can get a dog from, right? Generally.
Well, you can do sooner. I mean, I've only been doing 8 years. Um,
That's what I was going to say. So only 8 years is a long time in my world. Who I know next to nothing about breeding, but what I'm keying in on is that you have been in it long enough to see what's predictable in your line.
oh, absolutely.
Uh,
And I knew that probably within about 4 years. Yes.
mm, Interesting. And so are you seeing it in any of your line, let's say even just retrospectively, are you seeing an occasional dog that just seems to be born afraid, not timid or shy, but actually afraid?
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
We'll have some, and I had to be really careful. I actually pulled a breeder because her puppies, they struggled a lot with submissive urination, which, you know, can be addressed through training, but it's a whole lot better if you just take it out of your genetics and not have to worry about it. One less stressor for your families. So with her, and she was just super timid. And so what I noticed is that when you were just working with them, they had a propensity to be afraid. Like, I don't beat my dogs, but they had reactions like I had beat them. And I thought,
Yeah.
okay, that's just something. And you would see it in litters. You would see that propensity in every dog that, or not every dog, but most of them would come out of this particular pairing. So we could switch
Wow.
pairings. So I was able to make that more robust by bringing in a little bit more like, just more, his temperament was more stable,
Yeah.
slower metabolism, easier going stud, and that really mellowed it out. I did retire that mom. And so
Mhm.
I was able to shift it all out. So I don't struggle with that anymore in my
Mm.
lives, which is really great. Another fun fact on that is the dogs that were more anxiety prone had more GI issues. They were,
That makes a lot of sense.
it
How
does, it's the
interesting.
same with people, right?
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. My veterinarian had told me a huge shout out to Dr. Palmquist, and Love a Pet is his office in Los Angeles, Inglewood, Los Angeles. Remarkable vet and human being, and really comprehensive. And he was the first person that I heard say to me, if the female is under duress up to 6 weeks prior to being pregnant, it can change the makeup of the puppies. And that was staggering and kind of scary to me, because I think on my end, on the training end, particularly from an aggression standpoint, which rarely shows up early, but it does. It just shows me how far behind the eight ball I am, and how broad and deep my scope as a training professional, particularly a humane training professional, has to be to support this family and this dog.
I agree with you. I think there's so much that goes into it. And I think what's really hard is that in your profession, you're essentially, I mean, you're dealing with the symptoms. You're on the back end of it. I mean, you're putting a Band-Aid. Well, I mean, I'm sure it's a little bit better than a Band-Aid, but you're essentially putting the Band-Aid on the situation that probably could have been avoided entirely had there been better breeding involved, just better selection. And then a couple other things down the way, even a better alignment of breeder and buyer.
Agreed. Yeah, I think I'm in the repair business. I mean, now that you mention it, yeah, I'm in the repair business, and what I'm hoping to do, and getting to talk with you on this platform is another way for me to see. I would like to get out of the repair business, actually. Now that I
You
think,
become a breeder? Is that no?
no, no, no. I love God. The country just went, huh? I wouldn't know the first thing or where to start. But it would be like I love what I do, and I'm really fortunate to be able to do it. But it would be a good day if people didn't need my help anymore. That's what I mean. And so the further I can go into how we get ahead of behavior, I think the better I am contributing to our dog human world at large.
And so for that, it would mostly be, preparing people so that they are just better in general. And could you speak on what you've seen just anecdotally on the pairings? Have you seen? So one thing I always wonder is, like, I find a lot of people want to buy a dog to compensate for something that's missing in their life. Sometimes that's
Bingo.
emotional. Sometimes they don't have kids. So they're like, oh, this will be my kid. And I mean, that's a topic maybe a little scary. And then the other thing, but then sometimes you get like the guy, he's like a retired Marine. He's like, I'm going to get the biggest dog and the biggest truck because I am 5'4" and I just need it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. He's going to take good care of the dog. But I get a little nervous when, there's a girl and she's 100 pounds soaking wet and she wants to buy the most aggressive guard dog, and maybe compensation because she doesn't feel safe.
Yeah, yeah. This one is there's a lot to dive into here. So first out, shout out to the Marines, and the one of the things that I'm doing in my work right now. In fact, literally an hour before we got to talking, I concluded. I concluded.
Concluded.
Okay, I completed and computed. I'm still processing it. A mentorship program. And the mentorship program, which is called MAP, standing for Mentoring Animal Partners, is about how we humans show up for the dogs.
Mhm.
And the further I go into my work as a trainer and teacher and mediator and facilitator, the more clear it is to me that everybody benefits if we can start to get honest about our motives.
Tell me more.
So, okay, I need a dog because I had a really bad breakup,
Oh, yes.
right? I need a dog because, oh, I know I don't mean to upset people here, but this is going to be probably difficult.
Hey, the Honest Dog Breeder Podcast.
Yes, yes. I need a dog for an emotional support,
Yes.
but I'm not going to consider the emotional well-being of that dog that I am requiring support me.
And yes, while that is probably the honest statement, to know if they're even aware that that's what's happening it's
Yeah.
unlikely. And they probably don't even know they are doing that.
No, no, that's true in a lot of cases. This is a bit of a side tip. General rule of thumb:
Mhm.
never train your own service dog. Just say that for anybody that's listening. And I know next to nothing about the service dog world, but I trust the people that work there and their integrity. Don't train your own service dog too close to it. I get those calls too, because the training can't be done the way it needs to be done because the individual that needs the dog to serve them has an agenda. And few things will change a dog's natural behavior than a human agenda.
Yeah, there you go.
Other scenarios. We have kids and my kids need a playmate. Other scenarios. I have a dog and my dog seems unhappy because another dog passed, or my dog played with a dog once, but other than that, my dog's aggressive with a bunch of other dogs or reactive, but let's get another dog. All kinds of scenarios like that. So
Yeah.
I'm not a great model. I'm reflecting a lot of my own experience. There was, I went from being afraid of dogs to, and also your listeners, none of your listeners may know this. I've also, if I stay clean and sober this week, it'll be 15 years. So I don't have a history of really good decisions. But my point is that even in my early sobriety, as somebody who is afraid of dogs, I end up within a year or two with my now wife, Brooklyn, then girlfriend, having 22 dogs in our house, running a daycare and training business, uneducated, uninformed, and just like neck deep in it.
Yeah.
So I'm not a good model for how to start in many ways. We now have 3 dogs with us. A couple of years ago, we had 8. And so rehoming, appropriate rehoming, and passing in time. All of this is to say, my motives have been questionable at best. But if I'm willing to get support, let's say from people like yourself or trainers who have helped me, continue to help me along the way, then we're not going to be the sum total of my mistake. The dog's life is not going to just be stuck with whatever judgment I had to get it. And anybody, particularly in the rescue world, will tell you, or I'll just speak again for myself. Whatever my motive was to bring a dog home, I stuck around long enough to help change that dog's life for the better. So it doesn't mean my motive was the right one. It just means that my intention seemed to override that. And I think there's value in that, particularly because we're in a time coming out of the last couple of years that's been really, really hard for people.
Right.
Without making any political statement, but just the reality of generally speaking, living in isolation, that's been really, really difficult for people. And so I understand why they got dogs. And I understand why when they went back to work, they got rid of the dogs. And I understand why the dogs are suffering. And the last part of this diatribe here, I understand it's not a diatribe, last part of this reflection here, I understand why when people wanted training for the dogs who are suffering because they've got dogs, consciously or not, to meet their own emotional needs, that the answer coming out of 2 years of not feeling like they had agency or freedom is to get dog training that immediately promises results, which typically relies on inhumane methods. So I finally can feel like after a couple of years, I can control something, and it happens to be this dog. That's a big open window. I know I just dumped on your listeners.
Yeah.
But those are all things I have to take into consideration.
It's huge. Well, so it comes down to, so we are aligning our puppies with homes. I mean, we're essentially matchmakers and we're not going to get it 100% right. But looking into it, the motivations for getting a dog, I mean, how does that play out? What do you think should be somebody's headspace when they go to get a dog? Like, what should that look like?
I think you and I talked about this, whether it was on Clubhouse or afterwards, that I really appreciated that was an awesome, I felt like we had all kind of met in a secret cave.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to
promote
Clubhouse. I'm not a fan of Clubhouse, but we actually got to do something amazing that Clubhouse afforded. And you were one of my early conversations with breeders who wanted to be honest and ethical about what they were doing. And we talked about a checklist, not just the general, what's your house like, but how do you really feel about having hair everywhere? You just did the laundry and you know that your dog was not wearing your underwear and your dog's hair is in your underwear. Like,
yes.
how do you really feel about this stuff? What's your daily life like? Do you think, and this is a bit of a training angle, but do you really think that your dog's behavior issues are resolved by walking the dog 3 times a day for 30 minutes each day? I'm going to tell you the answer is no.
Right.
So what's your stretch? One of the things that a mentor offered to me, Julie, is to create 3 scenarios, and so you could apply it a number of ways. Let's say somebody's talking to me about wanting to get a dog from a breeder. So I present them with one view of this 3-pronged approach. One is, what is the time you'd really like to spend taking care of this dog? I mean, be honest with me. You want to spend an hour a day? Well, that's not much time for a puppy, but be honest with me. You want to spend an hour a day taking care of this puppy? Okay, so what is the time you really want to spend? The second road is, what's the time you're willing to spend? 2 hours a day? Okay, so that gives us a window. The third road is, what is the time that this puppy will require that you will resent?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Right? And I'm usually called in because people weren't aware of option 3, you know? So like, what can I ask the person that can really frame things in terms of what supports them, the human end of it? Listen, I want you to understand what's going on with this dog and what's predictable genetically and what might be required of you. And I want you to know how challenging, wonderful, et cetera, but let's get into the dirty of it. How shitty this might be, literally.
Right.
And you want that? Because you could get a lizard, be lower maintenance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's part of how I dig in trying to support people before they even come to you. And I do recommend people come to you.
And you're talking about this too, and not just general maintenance and cleaning and, making sure they get outside and do their thing. But you're talking about also just the emotional needs of the dog and meeting those needs and just making sure they have quality of life for what they need.
Yeah, that's well said. So in part, one of the things that I commit myself to are called the Lima principles. LIMA stands for least intrusive, minimally aversive, which is generally a baseline for humane training. There's also something called that's been modified along the way, that the humane hierarchy. Laszlo, I think, created the humane hierarchy. And so, from a training standpoint, when we think about how to address a dog's needs uh, through the lens of behavioral modification, it is noteworthy that the first thing that as a certified humane trainer that I am educated to look at is the dog's wellness. And wellness is that individual dog, because you've seen 8 years worth of dogs. They're each their own individual. That individual sentient beings, emotional, physical, physiological, psychological well-being. And what we're seeing on the back end from a training standpoint is, if that is the primary concern of the breeder and the family where the dog may land, we probably drop half of our behavior issues if that's the way that people come into it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Going into it. So when people come to you talking about getting a puppy from a breeder, do you end up saying, hey, that breed you're looking at probably isn't a good fit? Does that come into play?
It does. I absolutely say that. And I don't like to be a buzzkill, but sometimes I joke that I'm a professional buzzkill, because we're trying to save a living being, and that I'm talking about your puppies, from suffering.
Right.
And suffering looks like a lot of different things. This is a bit of a sidebar, but I'm really digging in more deeply into trauma for dogs right now. And there's a trauma addiction expert named Dr. Gabor Mate, Mate, and he's got a book out now called The Myth of Normal. And I heard him on a podcast because I listen a lot for parallels in human dog experiences, and he described trauma as he said, we often think about trauma in terms of what happened to the individual. So that's typically where my work comes in for the dogs. But we rarely think about trauma in terms of what did not happen for the individual. And he defines trauma as the experience of the loss of self. And all kinds of things come out of the experience of the loss of self.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm trying to tee this up so that the dog and the human has a better experience and set the human up to succeed, because I think that's a relatively easier buy-in, I have to think about, what I might not be able to provide this dog.
Mm-hmm.
And let's get real about it, because there will be a brushback. And unfortunately, because a lot of behavior doesn't read overtly, it's not like what people would see on my show necessarily. For anybody that's watched Dog Impossible or might, you'll even see, as a side note, you'll see the arc from, yeah, thank you. You'll see the arc from my first episode, which I filmed in 2018, first episode of season 1, to the season finale of episode 2, of season 2 rather. You'll see the arc of my work right there, really into a more humane approach. So my point is that in this shock value world that we live in, a lot of dogs are suffering with behavior that we don't recognize.
Mm-hmm. And you're saying just merely because we don't understand it.
Yep.
I mean, I remember Cinch, Bill's cattle dog, he would always look at me and he would bring his paw up and I was like, oh, that's so cute. He wants to shake. And I was like, oh, no, he's telling me he needs some space.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's giving off a stress you a calming signal. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
And it's funny and it's silly because I didn't learn that until, gosh, it was right before we jumped on Clubhouse calls. I mean, so this was sadly far into my breeding that I learned this stuff and it really changed my world. I do think sometimes you get in those situations where you're pushed to the edge where it is no longer something you can tolerate. Cinch got kind of aggressive with my kids and it really helped me learn and dive into that and make something better of it. But I just, so many people just they don't know. So.
No, they don't know. And that's another reason why I appreciate a chance to be here with you, because they don't, if they don't know, they don't want to start knowing, because we're bashing them,
Right.
because we're judging them, belittling them, condemning them. That's really popular. I'm going to take the stand here for a moment. It's really popular in my professional community and in our society at large to use whatever platform, particularly social media, that you have to go after people. And I find it profoundly antithetical and hypocritical, for those of us that identify as humane, positive reinforcement, least intrusive, minimally aversive trainers, to then turn around and do that at people. But I understand, having survived cancel culture myself after the first season, with things that I don't necessarily argue about or things I had concerns about myself. It, generally speaking, in terms of animal behavior, doesn't make the animal, including human, actually want to join you or do something better.
Right.
So, opportunity to talk about this openly, and again, like, kudos to you, because you framed yourself that way from the beginning. I'm gonna be an honest dog trainer, which includes I'm in my process of learning. And if we practice this, then maybe one less person feels embarrassed, isolated, ashamed, and then they can talk to one more person like you or me, or somebody who wants to, be more considerate, and then the dog benefits. I mean, there's no way around the fact that it's a win-win for human and the dog and the world at large.
And like you said, it is from a marketing standpoint, getting the people on board with why this is better for them. Because if I was to take what we just talked about out of context, all of a sudden it sounds like you get a dog and the dog is now the center of your world and you need to do everything for that dog and you can't have a life until that dog has the best life. And it seems like people are like, well, I don't need a dog then. And it's like, oh, no, we just need to find that sweet spot, that perfect alignment. And I think what you were explaining before is the dog has needs. And when you meet those needs, then the dog, it can be what you want it to be because it's confident in itself. It knows.
Yeah, and I would double down on what you're saying and expand that the dog can be who it is. That's the thing, because what I hear in how you breed is you're breeding this dog for who it is. Arguably its best self. That's my word, not yours. But what I hear that you want sincerely for these dogs and the families that they land with is the dogs can be who they are, and that family fits for them. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. Because it's like, because you say there are no bad dogs. And I've
Mm-hmm.
said there are no, again, not a bad dog, but it could be a bad dog for you. And doesn't make the dog bad, but it makes the pairing bad. It's a mismatch. It's like having a bad relationship. There's only so many people you could really date long term. And
Yeah,
it's
that's
kind
true.
of the same thing with dogs. We need to find something that aligns with our lifestyle. And that's kind of our goal as breeders, is to find people whose lifestyle aligns with our dog. And
Mm.
so I noticed you brought up on Instagram, which is what actually triggered me into contacting you, as you were talking
Yeah.
about, are we misbreeding? Are we missing the mark? And I mean, you can tell us what the impression is from your side of the house of breeders,
Yeah.
and we can.
Well, I know, again, to be clear to your audience, I know next to nothing about breeding. So as I've had to practice more consideration, like somebody I got out of jail, I was unemployable, I was deplorable, so I'm only here because of the profound level of consideration that people have demonstrated for me in life. And I have to return that. Otherwise, things just don't go well for me. So having said all of that, I remember not knowing squat and being really judgmental about breeders. But
Mm,
that's kind of typical. I don't know something and I'm just going to pass judgment. That's inherently ignorant, right? So as I evolved or made a commitment to being more considerate, and I got to work with people who like they bring me in for a session and they would apologize about having got a dog from a breeder, and I thought, well, that doesn't help them. If I've already shamed this client, generally speaking, from my platform, like that doesn't help anybody, and that can't work. And then I talk to more and more trainers whose work I really respect, who say, look, this is not about not breeding dogs. This is about changing the way we think about the relationship there. All of this is to say, um, all of this is to say that the way that we talk about it has to change. Because if it doesn't change, it doesn't get better. That's plain and simple. And it is challenging to have conversations that I enter into ignorantly. There's a ton of stuff I don't know. But if I enter into a conversation without being willing to consider another possibility, then we're kind of toast and it's useless. So the general perspective for breeders, I'm a lot less on board with how it's generally cast. And I'm far more interested in the kind of trainers like Trish McMillan is one of my favorite trainers out there, and a number of people when the shelters were emptying
yeah.
at the beginning of quarantine and people were saying the shelters are emptying, this is amazing. And I also knew from my breeder buddies that the demand was higher than ever. All of a sudden we realized, hey, it might actually be possible where shelters aren't stacked and breeders are supported in breeding dogs that are better placed.
Right.
So that's where I land with all of that. And for myself, well, I think one thing that may have sparked you reaching out about this conversation was an open question I had of my industry, not thinking about breeders so much, but I'll tee it up for people. Um, in my work and in my field, there are a lot of people who will say something along these lines. My dog loves doing this. And there's a whole other conversation about what actually constitutes love, and does your dog actually love doing it, or does it just seem to want to keep doing it? And the why is a big factor.
Mm-hmm.
But where I find it to be really self-serving is if I come to you, Julie, and I say I need a short hair because short hairs love to do this, and I want a dog that loves to do this with me.
Mm-hmm.
Now you may be able to provide that, but for that dog to be bred for that, and then for me to have that dog, and then for that dog to do that, and then for me to feel good about the fact that that dog did that thing that you bred it for, it seems really self-serving. I didn't have anything to do with that dog's desire to do that. You did as the breeder, but I didn't. But what I want to poke holes at is this human angle that is patting itself on the back because the dog's doing the very thing that the breeder told them that the dog would do.
Right.
That's the kind of kookiness that I'm not down with. So I posited, and it was the beginning of what has become a really interesting conversation. Are we in our profession
Mm.
engaging in genetic coercion?
Coercion's a rough word. How to explain that further?
Yeah, coercion's a rough word. So coercion, so coercion means a lot of different things to a lot of people. But what I was getting at is, are we actually priming this dog against some level of its desired will or agency to behave a certain way, and then congratulating ourselves for the dog doing that?
Like the overly birdy bird dog that is so
Yeah.
birdy that it can't focus on anything else if there's a bird.
Yes. That's a
Mhm.
great example, Julie, because I see a lot of dogs. I don't know how many people I'm going to piss off with what I'm saying, and that's not my intent. But I'm just trying to ask questions, because some things I can't swear.
Mhm.
We're seeing, my colleagues and I, birdies, herding dogs.
Mhm.
We're seeing an uptick, an alarming uptick in dogs that are so hyper skilled. That's my word. It's not a sure it's not a technical word, but so hyper skilled or hyper, their drive for something is so over the top that the dog can't actually relax. That's actually not part of its component.
Yeah.
And I don't find that to be humane.
Sure. It's kind of like putting kids under an overly anxious situation, except it was bred that way.
Right.
And
Right.
so it's not, so I always look at that as, enrichment helps. But
Yes.
at what point in time is enrichment like a secondary job for the owners?
Great point.
It's a huge thing. And again, that is the misalignment. I always tell people, I love the cattle dog example because people can, or at least relate where I'm at in Arizona. But, you have a cowboy who takes his cattle dog out and he works them 16 hours a day and he's running cows and he's working with his owner all day long. He's happy as a clam. He comes home, passes out, and he's like, yes. And that dog has the life, does exactly what he's supposed to do. And he's so happy, in my opinion, coming back and doing that. He's exhausted, sleeps well, everything's good.
Yeah.
You take that same dog and you put it in a house with two owners that work full time and it's an apartment. And it's like, this dog is going to lose his mind.
Absolutely.
And so the question is now, do you tell people you can't handle this dog? Because that goes over really well.
Yeah.
And because you can't say that. So then you say, okay, well, it has a lot of quirks that you're going to have to work out because that's work. Now we're going to be, work. And so I always tell people you want to find that lifestyle with your dog where your lifestyle meets the dog's needs without much extra thinking. It's just
Yeah.
lifestyle. And that would be the most ideal.
Mm-hmm.
So then from the breeder side, should we change those drives?
Mm.
You have a cattle dog that no longer cares about cows, but if it's happy in a home, is that success?
Yeah. God, that's an amazing question. I almost feel like I've entered into that. God, I don't mean to be crass or insensitive, but I almost feel like I've entered into the laboratory conversation here. Like
With our lab
nobody's,
coats and beakers and yeah.
yeah. But
Mhm.
what you just asked me, nobody's ever asked me, and I would say the modern dog is suffering in a way that we've never seen before. And that includes purebreds from reputable breeders. And,
Oh,
and reputable is different than breeder, is different than ethical breeder. I'm going to say that because I got a ton of people that frankly I think got shafted by somebody who is considered a reputable breeder.
well,
You know?
reputable isn't that just a reputation anyway?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my answer would be, please, God, yes. Like if that is part of what's available, there could be a lot of there could be more homes where more dogs like that are happy.
Absolutely.
Sidebar on enrichment. I wish I'd known this years ago, but in enrichment, particularly chewing, licking, and sniffing, but we're generally talking about needs met, genetically predisposed needs,
Mhm.
predictable behavior needs. 30 minutes of chewing, licking, or sniffing is equivalent to about an hour of physical exercise in terms of stress release and mental relief.
Yeah.
So, So I can help clients on my end who got a cattle dog and they're trying to do the right thing by the dog and they live in an apartment. Okay, so let's get creative. Your
Mhm.
dog's not going to be hurting anytime soon. Well, let's get creative about what we can do, at least to reduce the stress that comes with the dog not getting some needs met. And what I find that's useful for a lot of enrichment activities is that they can happen independent of the human. And I think that's also important to consider with modern day life.
And you're talking about either creating an environment that's going to meet those needs, whether you are planting things in the backyard that have the smells they want, giving
Mm-hmm.
them, even, and I think having a buddy, I think one thing that we do, we kind of screw our dogs all the time, is we're like, this is my dog. It is my everything. And what you've done is you've now taken that dog and said, I will meet your every emotional need. And if I don't, you're screwed. And I think
Yeah,
so much we forget that they have those individual needs.
that I think you just kind of named most of my relationships. I will meet your every individual need, or you must meet my every individual need, and if you don't, we're both screwed. Yeah,
Oh, it's bad.
yeah.
I think
So yeah,
it's
you're
too much
right about that.
pressure. It's too much pressure on the owner. You don't want a lifestyle like that. That sucks.
Yeah, I really like the way you keep framing it. And Kim Brophy talks about this a lot. It's why she considers herself a family dog mediator,
Mm.
because these are quality family of life issues, and that was a really important reframing for me. I don't really, because it's part of how things get marketed. Yes, you can find me as a dog trainer,
Mhm.
uh, and I, I'm like, I'd like to think I'm more of a teacher, but that sounds like something you do in LA. So I don't really know what the word is, but I really care about the quality of life for the entire unit. And that's one thing, back to a lot of your questions, that's one thing that helps me lead into a conversation with people. I care about your family quality of life because
Yeah,
this dog doesn't need to suffer and you don't need to suffer because your dog is suffering and vice versa. So it's an easier buy-in, or most people to get on, better easier for more people to get on board when I say, what kind of quality of life do you want?
yeah,
Let's start there.
right.
Lifestyle, quality of life. Yeah.
Absolutely. I know it's on my puppy application is like, what lifestyle do you envision with this dog? What's a day to day? What does that look like, in your ideal world? I think it's so helpful to see what their expectations are. And I think that misalignment
Mhm.
of expectations is often what causes the most problems.
Do,
Okay.
do you have a habit in your experience, or do you find yourself in your experience sussing out what's in between the lines, what people do and what they don't say
Yes.
in their application?
Yeah, trying to get to the root of what they're really looking for. Um, there's like a joke in the marketing world that it says, sell them what they want, give them what they need.
Hmm.
And so, if I was to be that, I really need a dog that hunts. I have three little kids under 8. I'm never home, but I need a really good hunting dog. And I'm thinking, you really need a family dog.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so
Or
it's
not, yeah.
about giving them the dog that fits their needs. And, you can say, well, if I'm going to exaggerate traits of this dog that is going to benefit them that they want to see, and I'm going to minimize things that they think they don't need, but they really need, is
Mhm.
that dishonest, or is it really doing them a favor and being the most honest by giving them the best fit?
Yeah. So it's another important open question. In my purview, we are ethically bound to dogs. We're 10 to 40,000 years into living with dogs, and what seems to have shaped it more than anything is how can they serve us?
Mhm.
The industry I'm going to generalize here, there seems to have been three movements. And so initially, because modern dog training is about 50 years old, by the way. So sorry to all my trainer friends, but we're not that important. We are needed. We're needed right now. But in the history of dogs, a lot of people probably did pretty well. Like you talked about farm life. My grandfather couldn't understand why I had dogs in my home, and his farm life, to a great extent, was a lot of those dogs' needs got met. In some ways, absolutely not.
Mhm.
But what I'm getting at is there seem to be like three large movements, and the first one is the first big marketing push was get a dog and make it do certain things, and you will be happy.
Mm.
And then the second, and we're still, I think, beholden to a lot of that paradigm. If your dog can do blank, you will be happy.
Yeah.
The second shift, which is newer, is, and there's money to be made in it, which is why it's coming up, is if you help your dog be happy, you'll be happy.
Right.
But the hitch is still there. If the dog blank, you'll be happy, right?
Yeah.
I think the movement beyond that, which is the conversation that I'm particularly interested in, is what if the entire industry was built on consideration of the dog? I could make a case that I would have to back up that says we would probably save a lot of heartache. We'd save a lot of money in shelter issues and vet visits and insurance costs and training expenses. We'd probably save a lot of money if our industry shifted to, what might be good for this dog? To
Mm-hmm.
your point, family that works for it.
Right. Well, it's interesting because it does bring up an interesting ethical question. Dogs, sure, they have free will, if you will, except for the fact that I'm selecting who breeds who. So maybe they don't.
Right.
So if that's the case and they can't really pick, then
Yeah.
if I'm breeding them to quote unquote love the thing they're going to be exposed to and the lifestyle they're going to lead, it,
Yeah.
it feels like I'm doing the right thing. But
Yeah.
where you run into a lot of tension for breeders, and this is heavier in some breeds than others, so each one is going to feel it differently, is that you get this pressure. I mean, there's this stupid line in the breeding industry, and I'll call it stupid. Breed to improve the breed. What the heck does that mean? I
Yeah.
mean, yes, okay, so do I have the best cattle dog ever and all my people, because I live in the center of downtown Phoenix or something, all my people live in apartments? That doesn't work. And
Yeah.
so it's not a service, but then you get to a point where if you change so much of what that dog is it even that breed anymore?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you
Oh
start,
God.
it's a breed standard. So now you have a breed standard.
Yeah, and you see what we've done with breed standards. We have dogs that have hip dysplasia at 6 years old. We have dogs that can't breathe.
Yes.
Um, if I want to Hulk smash some of that stuff because that is wicked. It's wicked and it's deeply indoctrinated. And people are so heavily invested in certain aspects of breed standards at the expense of dogs' well-being
Mhm.
that if one talks about it, boy, they're coming after you.
Well, there's a lot of money in it. So you
There's
think
a
about
lot of money.
all the reproductive clinics that have popped up for, veterinary reproductive clinics, because a lot of dogs can't naturally breed anymore and they can't naturally whelp anymore. And so
Yeah.
now we have to schedule AI, we have to schedule C-sections, and it's like, we're really doing a number on this dog. Uh,
Yeah, if I ask a like a sci-fi type question, how would you feel if this was part of your lineage, that you came from a lineage of humans who were artificially inseminated, um, who were put on a rack, who were um, not capable of producing what they needed to be able to create children, who had genetic inclinations and physical challenges that were bred into them. Like, that sounds awful. That sounds horrifying.
it does. It sounds very scary.
But the fundamental scientific, most profoundly scientific question to start with in regards to dogs and humans is how how might the dog feel? Or if I were a dog, how would I feel? And if we started there, we got a lot to unpack.
No, I think so. I think so. And I mean, breeding them so that they do enjoy and have drives to do the things that we're going to live them with them and do, that makes a lot of sense to me. But
Yeah.
let's do that in a way that benefits them, that gives them quality of life, just because of how they exist. No hip
Mm.
dysplasia, for example.
Right, right.
Let's let them breathe and let's focus on
Yeah.
those things. And I think what's so frustrating from the breeding side of it is that people want it. People,
Yeah.
I mean, I work with a bunch of doodle breeders and they're amazing. They care so much about what they're producing.
Yeah.
And people are so bent on hypoallergenic, for example, that they forget that there's so much more involved.
Yeah.
You're looking at color patterns when the people really need to look at the drive of the dog that's crossed.
Yeah. I thank you for bringing that up, because shout out to the ethical doodle breeders. And I know the demand is staggering, because I hear my clients say, we waited a year and a half to get this dog from this breeder, and we got the dog. And I'm not speaking to any, I'm not trying to poke at any breeder, so heads up with that. But what they will tell me is, we got the dog and the dog is really anxious. Well, if the demand is high and people are trying to do the right thing, and their answer is, well, I'm not going to wait for you, I'm going to go somewhere else, and going somewhere else means that line doesn't actually have time,
Yeah.
and we don't get information about what's happening in that line, and we're not disclosing what's happening in that line. I the number of doodles that are coming my way
Mm-hmm.
is it's scary. I just did a session with somebody in LA, and they did their homework, as they understood homework, and they got a dog from somebody who, again, had reputation, and they got this doodle, and this doodle is, now approaching 2 years old, and the anxiety level is so high and the fear is so high, but they got the color they wanted,
Right.
and they got the size they wanted,
Mm.
and it's hypoallergenic,
There you
and
go.
that's about the extent of what they knew to ask for, you
Yeah.
know
Oh, absolutely. And
yeah.
it's extremely difficult just in doodles because you're mixing two breeds. And
Yep.
generally it's a poodle, which is great. Poodles are super intelligent. I did this, I was joking with a doodle breeder and we were like, well, why does it work? Because it works a lot. And we think it's just because poodles are vanilla. They kind of go with everything,
Mm.
you know?
Mm.
They seem to add intelligence. They're athletic, they bring health most of the time. I mean, they bring a lot of great qualities, and I can see your eyes popping out of your head saying you're not seeing the whole story, Julie.
well, I was saying that I think poodles would argue against being vanilla. That's all I was. Every poodle I know seems to think that they are the single most important breed on the planet, and I have a lot of respect for them. But I hear what you're saying in terms of what they bring. That my eyes were like that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, in comparison, could you imagine if it happened to be German Shepherds that had the correct coat like a poodle? You wouldn't, it would not work.
No, can we, and while we're at it, can we please not, can we please stop breeding Pomskys? Can we please?
What
I
is it with
mean,
the Pomsky?
Pomsky is a Pomeranian Husky.
Correct, but what is it that gets you?
Well, so Huskies are part of a line that a lot of us in our profession would refer to as the natural dogs, one of the longer lasting lines, one of the longest lasting genres of dog. And so what is typically, and Kim Brophy does a lot of deep dives into this, but what is typically predictable genetically for a natural dog, I'll pull up actually the notes, so that, because I have my notes handy and I don't want to give misinformation here.
Sure.
What's typically predictable for a natural dog is that they are wild at heart. It's the mystique is part of what we love about Huskies, that they're a free spirit, they're unchained, instinctual, intuitive, they're not clingy, demanding, obsessive, or needy. So stop right there. Anybody ever want a Pomeranian that didn't want to focus just on them? That's what the toy breed is. The whole thing is,
Yeah.
you're my toy. So right there we have a predictable genetic conflict.
Yes.
Also, natural dogs, strong sense of self-preservation, wilder impulses, can be difficult to train or handle as a pet. The reason why people are typically reaching out for professional help with a natural dog, and natural dogs would include Akitas, Alaskan Malamutes, American Eskimos, Basenjis, Canin's, Carolinas, Chow Chows, Dingoes, um, Keesounds, Siberian Huskies, Japanese Spits, which in my line, which is my Jindo, fell into that line. So typically, people are reaching out for help because of predatory behavior towards other animals, not coming when called, difficulty when being confined, intolerance of being handled or restrained, destructive behavior, difficulty responding to training. So if that is half of your Pomeranian,
Yeah.
then you have a handful. And if I'm the husky, imagine like in another bad sci-fi film, if I'm a husky and I wake up in a Pom's body, I am freaking the F out.
Right.
And if I'm a Pom, a little body with big feelings, and all of a sudden I got husky in me, I am freaking out with a vengeance.
Yeah. Well, because you're not really the husky body allows it to have certain accommodations, and
Yep,
that is just
and
not afforded.
consequently it needs that. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Which makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense. And I think it is one thing to note, the joke about poodles being vanilla is the fact that it does allow that cross to work a lot. But the misunderstanding is that other crosses would be as successful.
Mm-hmm.
And it really does come down to the conflict of drives and their just natural temperament.
I just remembered my client, just the one that had the has the golden doodle. She just got the DNA test, and apparently, in the line like 3 generations back, there's actually one poodle, and all the rest are golden retrievers.
Interesting. Was it
Yeah,
from the pedigree or was it from the DNA?
it was from the DNA, is what
Okay.
indicated.
I
Yeah.
will be honest, I've found a lot of them, they don't have enough DNA yet to really make a true
Well,
assessment.
that's good to know. That's good to know on my end, because we're trying to rely on whatever information we get.
Sure. To give you an idea, the German short hair itself was created about 130 years ago, but they took 60% of the original breeding stock was English pointer. And
Mm.
so you're gonna see that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be there. Yeah, like that friend that just keeps showing up for better or for worse.
Oh, that cat. Yeah, like a cat. Mhm. I'm
Yeah.
not really good. I'm not really good at cats. I have one cat, but I like her because she's like a dog, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm I got nothing to offer cats yet. My
Right.
future might be cats or Chihuahuas or Great Danes. That might be my future.
Yeah. Interesting on each end. Yeah.
I'm trying to stay open, but Chihuahuas are trying to take over the world. They're showing up everywhere, so I got to respect that.
They're cool. I mean, they're
They
cool.
are.
I guess I think, coming back to like, there are so many Chihuahuas that are missing the health that we wish they had. And what's really unfortunate is when you look at breeding them, people don't want to pay the money that it would need to breed them well. Because
Mhm.
you're going to have like that, for lack of a better word, backyard breeder down the road who's going to be breeding them and selling them for a couple $100. And um, so it becomes really hard in the market to create certain breeds to make them better. That's what I've seen. And I really think the solution for all of this, a lot of times you'll hear people say, oh, these things need to be regulated. This needs to be regulated. This needs to be regulated. And I find like it doesn't work.
Mm.
It just allows people to become criminals more easily.
Mm.
What I'd rather see happen is the education shift. I'd rather
Yeah.
see, you know, helping buyers understand why this isn't a good fit, or understanding why you want to spend the money to get a dog that has these boxes checked off.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about since I landed in Texas about a year and a half ago, the I just wanted to find ways to connect with the community, find ways to be of service, because that's part of what saved my life, to be honest with you. And I got connected. I've become an ambassador for the Texas Humane Network and the Texas Humane Legal Network. And shout out to them. We're going into winter here in Texas, and so they got a law passed that that mandated that dogs be afforded certain basic needs in terms of shelter, length of leash, access to water, and also that a general civilian could call in to law enforcement a dog that was in inhumane conditions. And what was key about that is until a year ago, there was a 24-hour hold. So that dog that you saw, you had to wait 24 hours, call in that dog. And within 24 hours out here, that dog would be dead. So Texas Humane Network and Legal Network, coming back to the education part, one of the things that they are deeply invested in is education, and particularly for the younger people in the communities, because that's really the future of it. And their feedback is when there's a school um, engagement with an animal and humane opportunities to learning humane opportunities to learn, that would be good at any school, but opportunities to learn about humane care,
Yeah.
that 8-year old, that third grader is likely to come home and say, oh, we don't actually have to kick the dog. This is something I learned today.
Mm.
And that can grow up,
Mm-hmm.
upwards. So I think that is, I think what you're saying about education is vital. It is vital, regardless of whether or not I think it, and how we do it has to include consideration for those families, for those
Absolutely.
people
But
that are out.
people are much more likely to do something if it benefits them. So
Yeah,
we have to start with the benefit. You
yeah,
know, you're going to love your life with your dog and not resent it so much or not hate it if you know how to handle it.
yeah. That's right. You won't be calling me in 3 years saying we can't take a vacation. I got a lot of those calls.
Wow.
And those are slippery slopes too, by the way. Like very few people say, I'm going to get a dog that's going to ruin my life.
Right, right. Well, that's the thing.
But
No one
that
ever
seems
buys
to
a
be
dog to make their life worse.
yeah, not consciously at least. You do get people, they're trapped in some kind of cycle and they're just going to keep making decisions that keep them trapped.
Yeah.
That's its own thing. But yeah, but quality of life, education, open conversations like this, where we get to talk about really where do we draw the line? Well, I don't know. I'm not breeding. I'm just on the end of supporting people, and supporting dogs and supporting the breeders that help those dogs get there. Like who can I help? Because what's good for the dog is going to be good for the world, period.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly it. But that because it benefits everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's less dogs in shelters, it's less tax money diverted. It's, less stress when you come home. You're not worried about taking vacations. You can board
Right.
your animal easily. It's, you're not worried where you have to, I think the amount of people, so I've run Airbnbs and
Mm-hmm.
always interesting because I allow people to bring dogs, separate property. Um,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, side note.
the way that they everybody and all their quirks with their dogs, everybody comes in and they have this list of, well, I can't do this with my dog because of this or this, and it's like you're like walking this maze around a lifestyle just to have this little dog. And
Yeah.
I find it's nuts,
Yeah, and we've normalized it. I think it's one of the we have normalized um, a complicated life, dog life. We have normalized, um, a lot of cases we've normalized. I mean, I get called in on the aggression end. We've normalized living with violence, you know, with dog violence. Those aren't slippery slopes. We love the dogs, and that's generally why we hang in there. And we've also, to your part about how dogs are being bred, we've normalized that my dog just is going to have trouble walking at 6 years old, and my dog's going to have trouble breathing. I tell you what, I'm going to general you. Why don't you have trouble breathing? Let's do that for a few days. Let's just make sure you have trouble breathing, and then let me train you and see how well you learn, and then let me train you with punishing method, and then let me feed you another cocktail of nonsense that says that the reason why I'm not following the training you're teaching me is because I'm willful and I don't want to please you.
right.
We've normalized all of that,
Yeah.
you know? That's crazy.
And it's
The other end of it is another aspect of it is the ideology. Um, that this is who this dog has to be, or this is I'm not even going to go down this road, but I find that in my professional and the training end, we have become so ideologically entrenched that we're not actually practicing how to have adult conversations. We're just saying, I'm good, you're bad, I'm right, you're wrong. And that shows up. The dogs suffer for that too.
Well,
are you, go ahead, Julie. I don't
well, I
want
was
to
just
interrupt you.
saying, it's funny because you made that comment about judgment earlier, and it's like judging someone is the lazy way out. It's just
Ah,
signing blame, judging, and just writing it off, and
yeah,
not trying to find a solution. But
yeah, yeah. And the idea that, yeah, that's a great way to frame it. And the idea that that doesn't, if I judge you and then sign off on it and then I'm out, the idea that that doesn't actually impact me in a negative way is, to put it kindly, less than informed,
yeah,
right? Because if I'm because behavior from a dog standpoint, behavior is functional, and behavior, and we practice behavior for better or for worse.
mm,
So if I practice being inconsiderate, are we all better off because I practiced being inconsiderate? Not the world I'm looking at. You know what I mean?
right, absolutely.
Hmm. A lot of needs, just jumping around, a lot of training. There's some amazing things happening in some of the work that I'm not at liberty to share yet, but a lot of needs getting met are getting met in new and creative ways, which are reducing the need for training. I've seen dogs who get wellness issues addressed and enrichment issues addressed, and 70% of why the people wanted my help doesn't even matter anymore, because the
Yeah.
behavior, you know.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's huge. And I'm hoping, and I know you can't elaborate probably too much, but I'm hoping that there's something, because it is a big struggle for breeders. We have so many dogs, and we need so many dogs. I mean, it's better for our breeding program to have that. It's better to understand them, to know what we're breeding against what and everything. But to meet all their needs individually is very difficult. And so trying to find that balance is really important. How can I create a way that they can have their needs met without me physically going in there and making all those things happen?
Yeah, yeah. What are some of the, your listeners may know this already, but since I get a chance to talk with you at length, what are some of the, what are some of your hardest challenges, um, in your breeding experience?
Oh, as far as like just anything.
Yeah, yeah, anything.
Well, it's in the beginning when you first start out, it's hard to find a breeding dog. That's tough because nobody wants to sell you a breeding dog. I don't know why. It's like a weird thing in the industry. It's like it'll reflect poorly on me if I set you up for success. So that's weird. If you don't show, people give you a hard time there. So you have a lot of, I think, oh, and then the adopt don't shop moment comes at you and says, oh, you're a horrible person for breeding. You're basically, the scum of the earth. And so there's like a lot of confidence that comes in. And I noticed, I have not found anything in my life that has developed me more as a person than breeding dogs, because it forces me to have an answer for all those things. And if it's a crap answer, they're going to call me out on it. So it has to be well thought out. I can't tell. There's thousands of decisions I've had to make and thoroughly mull over and sort. And so that's just from a philosophical side of dog breeding. But then you have
Mhm.
the side of dog breeding that's difficult because, I am managing a bunch of dogs. And I noticed that buyers as a whole do not know that I'm not a veterinarian. I'm not a dog trainer. I don't know how to do this stuff. I know how to whelp puppies and keep them alive and raise them and send them home with you, but I don't know all these things. And so
Mhm.
it's really helping buyers to understand what I can and can't do for them, and then how to set them up for success on the things that I can't directly help them with.
Mhm.
It's a lot.
So part of a need that I hear that is missing is I don't know what the right word is for it, as a portal or a hub where a prospective buyer can talk to a trainer, an educated, humane, experienced trainer on the back
Mhm.
end. Hey, before you buy, I'm going to offer myself here, obviously, but there's a ton of people that are just amazing to listen to in the training field. But before you buy, talk to this person about what the training experience is like.
Mhm.
You know, talk to them about
No.
what some of the challenges are. They're just some, marvelous, two marvelous puppy trainers that come to mind. One is Leslie McDevitt, McDevitt, and other one is Kathy Sadeo. There's so many out there. Suzanne Clothier, Sylvia West, a dog up in this bitch out in LA. Yeah, I mean, if you're not down with the name, she's not for you. If you're down with the name, she's right in your wheelhouse. Um, yeah, there's just amazing people that are doing things.
Yeah.
So to have that, if you as a breeder had that Rolodex, shout out to Rolodexes, if you had that Rolodex, that might be I'm thinking this out loud, that might be an interesting component of your business.
It's it's really helpful. So now that I've been doing this so long, I've got 4 different trainers in the state of Arizona that I work with for bird dog training.
Awesome.
And they have different personalities, different styles of training, so on and so forth. And so it's been so nice because I can reach out to them when I have questions. And at the same time, I can set my buyers up for success there. And then they're familiar with my bloodline. So it makes that training a lot easier. And so there is this network that's helpful. But to answer your question from a starting place, I really think it would be helpful to have, again, a easier education for buyers on what type of dog they need, um,
Yeah.
and really help them find the right one. And then also release the shame and some of the, I don't know, guilt that goes with breeding, where you are worried that, well, I breed bird dogs. Well, what if they aren't really birdie? And it's like, well, if they go to families that hike and camp and do no hunting, is that a problem? And I don't think it's a problem. That's success. That dog will be happier in that home.
I would like to see, I think that we could afford a lot of grace. I was thinking about my dear friend Beth Berkovian, Rehab Your Rescue in Dallas, who is my co-host on our clubhouse. Yeah, can't mess with Beth. God bless
Nope.
her. Um, and so it would be neat to see that normalized in the breeding industry. Here are a hub of whether it's breed familiar or breed specific trainers, or a hub of people that you can go to as a database. I think it'd be really neat to see in any kind of coalition of ethical and honest breeders. Here are people you can talk to before you get the dog,
Yeah.
when you're having the conversation. And then I'm offering this unsolicited, but to have no but, and to have those people, that's built into the intake. Okay, you can fill out, if I'm the breeder, you can fill out my application, and I also recommend that you have a conversation with one of these certified humane trainers,
Yeah.
and then come back to me.
Oh, absolutely. And I agree. And I think what we often do is, and it's hard because we want to sell the dogs, right? So we have this inclination to move
Yeah,
forward with the sale, but a lot of it we can fix even in our marketing, and then support. And I think one of the biggest things that's been successful in my program is that, and man, have I bit my tongue sometimes, on a phone call, but people will tell you the most horrendous things in the world. And the beauty is that they were willing to tell you. And then because they were willing to trust you with that horrid information, sometimes they don't know it's horrid, then you can help direct them. But again, like there are things I literally I'm not trained in. And so having that network would be very huge. Reach out
yeah.
to those people.
I'd like to see. I'm saying the general us from the professional training side.
Mhm.
I'd like to see us get more creative about how we help dog people.
What if you and I sat down and had a conversation,
Mhm.
and you went through and said, when someone comes to me looking to buy a dog, this is the advice I give them. This is the
Yeah,
conversation we have,
yeah,
and lay those questions out and then play out the answers a little and say,
yeah,
okay, so if you really have an hour at best to spend with this dog, what does that look like? And what kind of dog fits in that criteria? And it doesn't necessarily mean breeds, but it could be, okay, maybe it's smaller, or maybe it has low shedding, or, whatever the
yeah,
case is. Maybe
yeah,
it can be alone.
yeah. I think that'd be great. That would be a privilege to be able to further that conversation with you. However many ways we can get in, we should.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
let's normalize that it's not about getting a dog now. It's about getting the right dog.
yes,
And
yes,
that takes time. That might be
Yeah.
6 months, at least 6 months. That's average.
Yeah. God, that's such a great point. Because especially because we're gonna get it to me now, because I need relief. There's a number of amazing trainers in the UK. Andrew Hale, Dog Centered Care is his company in the UK. He's on a podcast with Kim Brophy and Dr. Kathy Murphy. Kathy Murphy is a neurologist. And the three of them have a podcast called Beyond the Operant. And operant, for those who aren't aware, it is a fundamental way that dogs learn. And so positive reinforcement typically is about a behavior that is operational. So Andrew Hale was a human psychologist or psychiatrist, sorry, Andrew, for about 10 years and then became a dog trainer. And so he was the first person that I heard talking on a large scale about how to support the humans. Him talks about quality of life as a family dog mediator. And then Dr. Kathy Murphy talks about how dogs' neurosystems work and what is and isn't predictable. So for a bird dog, what is a given is that the part of that dog's brain that goes after that bird is so deeply built in that the dog doesn't have to take time to think about it. Why? Because 1 second is the difference between success or not. But that also means, and pardon me, Dr. Murphy, because I'm generally paraphrasing, I'm trying to do justice. But what that also means is the aspect of that dog that might be subject to what we call a releasing stimuli. Something moves quickly at 50 yards. That dog may be primed to go after that. You live in a house with kids and your kid is 50 yards back in the yard. Doesn't mean your birdie is kid aggressive, but there's an accidental releasing stimuli.
Sure.
So that part of the brain that we want to help work, because we can't change genetics, but we can help we as trainers, we can help in terms of shaping the dog's learning, the dog's environment, and honoring the dog's general self.
Right.
So so that bird dog still has that impulse, but maybe it's not so driven. Not driven, it's not the right word. That impulse to go after that something is not also turbocharged by the environment it lives in and what it's learning and how it's learning. That's an important distinction. And how it's treated individually. So the dog can do its thing, but not do its thing on 5 cups of coffee.
Sure. And we can tackle that from the breeding end too by selecting for a slightly lower drive.
Right. Right.
We can really compound this to better fit the families they're actually going to.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting conversation to be had here because we're all basically talking about quality of life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So going back to a question I'd asked you earlier,
Yeah.
a lot of times, we have this idea, your dog's trying to dominate you and it's this old school model of everything. And, you got to get them to submit or whatever.
Yeah.
And we know that it's just not the case. And that kind of has slowly coming unturned in the world of dogs and understanding. But I find a lot of buyers still reference that with me in phone calls all the time. Well, I know I got to be dominant. And it's like, yeah, but do you, So I have to kind of get them on board with like, no, it's about leading, and it's like we set the husband and father at the head of the table out of respect because he leads the family. And it's not because he's a ass, he's not a mean guy. He's leading the family to take care of the family. And that's kind of what we need to be for our dogs. Hence the animal husbandry part of this.
Yeah.
And so it's a struggle we have all the time. I mean, I can make a nice little puppy guide for my people, but having them change that paradigm in their head. Do you have tips for how to do that? I'm sure.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I am in a living amends for what I've contributed to that model. I was afraid of dogs, and then I saw something on TV, and like my heart just opened up because what I saw a particular episode where that TV trainer helped a person get over his fear of dogs, and I didn't know that was possible. I was a grown-ass man who would cross the street when he saw a terrier coming.
Yeah.
So that opened up my world, and I wanted, just as a sidebar, say very small percentage of the people actually in the world actually reach out to trainers. I think roughly 80% of the dogs are not even in homes. But let's say in the US, I don't know what the percentage is, 5 to 10%.
It didn't even cross
Cost,
my mind. Yeah.
what's that?
It didn't even cross my mind when I
Yeah.
had
So
owned dog
right.
tired.
So it didn't, yeah, mine either. And so what am I going to do? Well, socially, we learn from what's on the screen. Okay, so that was part of my commitment going into season 2. I want to become a certified humane trainer and begin to show the arc of growth, et cetera. But the other point that's really important is I couldn't afford a trainer when I started. I had a job delivering food. Out of jail, I was a food delivery boy at 30. However many years that was, right? I couldn't afford a trainer. So when we're talking about how to get information into people's hands, um, we have to utilize what we can. Um, and part of how we bridge that conversation, because the dominance theory, which has been debunked, and has led to just a ton of inhumane, almost irreparable damage. And
Mm,
again, go back to what I was saying earlier, we're living in a time right now where people want results and they need results and they need to feel like they're in control in a way that they probably haven't felt for a while.
yeah.
So we're seeing a proliferation of dominance-based trainers in schools. And my colleagues and I are looking at each other and saying, is it just me or are we starting to like lose ground here? And that seems to be what's happening. So to answer your question specifically, one advantage I have, having done all of that, is that I can go into somebody's home or just share to anybody that's listening on the podcast. I'm in no position to judge. None. I'm here again because of the consideration that people outside and inside of this industry showed me. My dear friend Beth Berkovian is a great example of that. And Mike Shikasho and Kim Brophy and Trish McMillan and amazing people in our veterinary behaviorist Dr. Chris Pockel and so on. So I'm not in a position to judge, but what I am willing to do, that I think a lot of us don't seem to be willing to do, is actually be open about our mistakes in the service of others. And I have come to understand that nothing that I have done, and I've done a lot I wish I didn't do in life and in dog training, nothing I have done will be wasted if I'm willing to use it to serve somebody else.
Yeah.
So I arrive with a client saying, dominance, I totally get it. And then my skill set requires me to reframe that. By dominance, like, you talking about being in charge or controlling behavior? Like, let me understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Oh, you want the dog to behave a certain way. Totally get that, because that makes your life easier.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So let me show you some things that are really low maintenance for you to do,
Yes.
because by the time you're calling me, your experience of dominance is failing. Otherwise, you wouldn't call me. So let me just make your life easier. We don't have to get into ethical questions, and I'll show you how to change your family quality of life. In fact, I can teach you recall without ever asking a dog to come to you. You know, can we make it easier? Yes, great. Let's do that. And so that tends to be my way in. I'm not going to trip off of why you see it that way. You might not even know why you see it that way. That's something you heard, and that's your frame of reference for how we start the conversation. Cool. Let's make your life easier. I'll show you how.
And I think that's great. And I think you have to start with why it benefits them. Because
Mm-hmm.
I will say, when in the beginning, when I was listening to some trainers on Clubhouse and they're like, everything was about the dog, about the dog, about the dog. And I'm thinking, I will never be able to sell my buyers on this. Like, it will never
Mm-hmm.
happen. They need to know what's in it for them. Otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
I can't get them on board. But I think
Yeah.
knowing that there's that sweet spot of, you know, meeting their needs, and then therefore they can be the kind of dog you were hoping to get in the beginning. I think that's always it's feasible. Now, what is your take on, okay, so we figured out the dog has all these needs and we're really not in a position to meet those needs.
Mm.
Or, what is it? Because I get return dogs on that premise all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe not all the time, but enough.
Yeah. So I think, like, you said earlier in reference to there is no bad dog. Sometimes that's a bad dog for that situation. I really like the way my dear and recently passed friend Barbara Davelman, who started Ridgeback and Friends in Los Angeles, would say it. It's just not a good fit. Good dog, good people, not a good fit. And that really took a lot of weight off of it for me. So I have rehomed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that was that was based on my understanding of the home that dog went to. That was the right decision. Obviously, I don't know how it ended up. But I don't carry judgment about that because I don't find it to be useful. If the ideological hill is we never rehome a dog,
Mm-hmm.
then what the heck do we do for the people who have dogs that are unsafe to live with, or for the dogs who are suffering, but the people refuse to rehome them because of the inherent shame and judgment that comes with it?
Right,
I think
exactly.
we have a huge blind spot there. What I
Exactly.
respect about your position and what I personally ethically require of any of the breeders that I'm in conversation with ethically is you got to be willing to take that dog back, and not just take that dog back, but provide for that dog
Yes.
for the length of time that dog is going to be with you.
Sure,
Um,
absolutely. And almost always there's a crossover time. I've got to learn the quirks. I've got to see where that dog has pressure points and, find a home that will accommodate. A puppy is very malleable, but I don't know, not a return dog.
yeah. Do you familiar with the term? I don't know if I answered your question entirely, Julie. Did I give a satisfactory answer to the question that you just asked?
Oh, for just creating the leadership,
Yeah, creating
getting them on
leadership.
board with it.
Yeah.
Oh, I think so. I think it's, well, I mean, how are you getting them in that mindset? Are you just showing
Well,
them, selling them on the benefit for them? Is that?
I think that seems to be the easiest way in. No matter what, generally speaking, no matter what people's training methods are, they love their dogs.
Yeah.
We could pick the least popular trainers in the world. You can't tell me they don't love their dogs. Can't tell me that they don't love dogs. So there's a baseline that we can generally all pretty much agree on.
Mhm.
But from a leadership standpoint, it helps me because I'm recovering from my ego. It helps me to live in terms of what I can teach.
Yes.
That's an easier way for me to frame it. And because of the way technically that I train, my training is, which we would often refer to as free shaping and capturing, like catch your kid doing something right.
Mhm.
Oh, like my daughter right now, she's potty training. That is amazing that you made it all the way to the bathroom.
Right.
I know you're upset because you didn't make it onto the toilet,
Yeah.
but we're going to celebrate the approximation. So I think leadership even still can be loaded, but there's just some things we got to teach this dog.
Mhm.
And teaching this dog some things in a way that's easier for you to teach the dog is going to make your life easier. That is generally how I come into it. I trust Kim Brophy when she says, we're in a leadership position. I think that's fair because we're responsible.
Mhm.
Uh, but leaderships mean a lot of things to a lot of different people.
Agreed. Do you find some people come to you and they, were willing to do the work? Great. And you teach them some techniques. They're like, oh, wow, I see the results. And they're like even more excited to go forward. But then do you find that there are those people that just don't, they think that hiring you fixed the problem?
Mm. I think one of the advantages I haven't been public for a while now, certainly in LA and then with the show, is that um, if you're reaching out to me, the odds are very likely that you know that I have no interest in fixing your dog
Okay.
because your dog's not broken. And
Mm.
here's the radical thing: the dog's behavior is 100% appropriate based on how it experiences the world in that moment.
Yeah.
100. So if that birdie went after that kid at 50 yards because that kid's running around in the shrub, that behavior was 100% appropriate.
Mhm.
Everything else is judgment we put on top of it.
Yep. Yeah, that makes total sense. It's like when a couple goes into marriage counseling and they're both reactive and yep.
Right? Are you familiar with neoteny?
I am not.
Okay, so this is something I learned from Kim. I think it's spelled Neotony. Somebody can check me on that. Neoteny is is the presence. I apologize, I don't have my note for it right here, but it's the presence of a youthful experience which is accompanied with youthful behavior. So here's the thing to consider.
Mm.
One of the things that the big market wants to sell us is a puppy. And so there are a few things more popular than a golden retriever puppy, right?
Fair.
Neoteny is something that is an intentional part of a lot of breeding, wherein the puppy has a puppy look for years well into adulthood,
Mm-hmm.
right? I got it. Oh, it's such a puppy. It looks so young. Like that's desirable. That kicks off all kinds of oxytocin and big feelings, and you
Yeah.
get high off of that, right? But you can't change a dog's form, meaning the way it looks, without changing the function of the behavior. So, one thing I would recommend to people to consider is if you're getting a dog from a line that has a predictably youthful look, you will likely have a juvenile behaving dog well into adulthood. Are you ready for that?
Right. The perpetual toddler. Yes.
Perpetual toddler. Yep.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about that. But I will check out that terminology. I'll put it all in the show notes for everybody. That'd be good.
Yeah, cool. So, just so much to consider, but most of all, I love being able to have conversations like this. And, thank you again for inviting me and just for us getting to know each other professionally as we have in the caverns of Clubhouse and, in the light of social media, and being able to have conversations like this, just to have them and to have anybody listen to them and to have anybody want to have more of them. To me, that's like, I get really juiced around that. I am grateful. Everybody, I think, is probably better off now that I'm clear that I don't have the answers, and I'm grateful that I get to operate from that place where we can keep it. There's a bunch of us out there across the field in the industry, and there's a difference between the industry and the profession. I would say in the breeding profession, the training profession, the veterinary profession, I think there's an inherent nobility. I want to afford people that there's a nobility in it, but the profession is, and I think ideal is what we're working towards. But the industry is a machine, and the industry's goal is to perpetuate the industry. Period. Doesn't matter how it does it.
Yeah. And you're talking
So,
mostly from the financial gains.
right. So
Yeah.
that distinction is really key. So at least some of us in the profession are having conversations like this, and there are more and more popping up, particularly in terms of how do we support humans,
Mhm.
so that the people that come to you are better supporting your dogs. It's
Yeah.
just it's an interesting time to be in this work,
Hmm.
and I'm encouraged.
Well, you're definitely making a mark on it. I'll say that.
Like a dog that pees on something, Mark, or
Yeah,
like
like
a
like a good stud dog, not
okay.
just an average one.
Right on. I was going to say earlier because my shepherd, that we were talking about something that was really you hit on something that was really great for dogs, and my shepherd just farted, and I thought, oh, she agrees. Like she is so relaxed. She is just totally let go of that. Uh, yeah, so that's what we're after. So I trust you'll include it in the show notes as well, and people can find me. I'm active at Instagram and
Yes.
social media and into these conversations
Yeah.
and launching mentorship programs and
And then
you know talking about it.
checking out your show, it just gives such a great insight into just a different way to approach situations.
Yeah, thank you for that. I really, even watching the things that I'm learning from and changing. I think the thing that I really went in after that I think I hear you saying, Julie, correct me if I'm wrong, is that what we're really talking about is how to have a better relationship.
Yes. Yeah.
Period.
I think I was actually reflecting this morning when I was out by the dogs, and I was thinking, dogs, they love us and they're so loving. Like they don't hold grudges. They're like such an ultimate friend, almost like a great mentor, if you will.
Yeah.
because they are forgiving. And it's so funny, but you can have a contentious relationship like I had with that cattle dog for a year and a half. And,
Mhm.
I talked to Beth and she's like, oh, Julie, you're an idiot. You're doing this, this, and this. And if you guys
Mhm.
want to know about that, that's another episode. Um, but once I changed it, like literally in 3 hours, he was a different dog. And I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely an idiot.
Right.
He didn't hold a grudge. He wasn't like, well, you were a pain in my butt for for 18 months and now you can have it. No, he just like, oh, okay, cool, thanks. And
Mm.
and so I almost think it's like these dogs are down here to teach us how to be better people.
Yeah.
They give us such an
Amen.
opportunity for that.
Amen. Yeah. And anybody at any level of their interaction in life with dogs, pretty much anybody I ever talk to will say, yeah, I just learned something about myself from that dog. And that's the secret. That's the not so secret secret. If I
Mm,
do what's good for the dog, I'm going to change for the better. And I got a lot of changing I want to keep doing. So I'm going to keep doing what's good for the dog.
yeah. Oh, I love it. All right, last question. I know you got to go.
Yeah.
If you could change anything in the world, culture, community of dogs as a whole, what would you change? What do you wish people knew? What shift would you like to see?
Oh gosh,
Like, you.
yeah, thanks for asking. My primary focus right now is consideration. It's different than it's different than be more compassionate because some of us didn't access that very easily in our lives. It's different than be more kind. I think kindness can be weaponized, sometimes in
Yeah.
certain movements. Be kind, but
Or
you
else.
know, or else, right? But but I think consideration, and it's just a simple question. Is there something that I don't know that might change the way I think?
Yeah.
That's simple. And that is my mission right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the open circle on the logo. And, some of the best advice I think I ever got is I heard, do not listen to everything, believe nothing. And
Mm,
the premise behind it is that once you believe something, then that is your belief system. And everything
mm,
you learn has to be filtered into that belief system. And if it
right.
doesn't fit, you throw it out. And you almost do
Right.
it on a subconscious level. And it
Yeah.
prevents you from finding solutions because you're stuck in this rut of thinking. And so if
Yeah.
you listen to everything, believe nothing, keep your mind open.
That's right.
Love it.
And don't make the mistake of seeing where you're at and thinking that's where you've ended up.
Yeah. Well, you might as well just die at that point if there's no more growth, right? So,
And on that note, we're out.
well, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
It was a real pleasure. It's great getting to talk with you at length and good to see you again.